I'm in Moline, Illinois, by the way. I know Articles of Faith is from Chicago. Have you ever played in the Quad Cities?
No, I don't think we ever did. Um, I can't remember. I don't even know if I've ever. I know I've been out there, but it was probably, because I had something going on or something like a trip or something.
Yeah, Moline, East Moline, Rock Island, Davenport, Bettendorf, which those last two are on the Iowa side. But yeah, I'm not an Illinois native. I'm from Kansas, but I just moved up here in April, so that's kind of
Hmm.
interesting. So, I read that Articles of Faith, you founded the band in 1981, and it was originally called Direct Drive.
Yep,
What
that's
was
right.
what was the motivation for the name change?
Well, we changed our style. So, Direct Drive was a band that I formed when I was in college at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb. And, it's kind of my first punk band. And mostly we played a lot of covers. We played, Blondie covers and Sex Pistols covers and Clash covers. And had a few original songs, but mostly they were covers. And then uh, in 1981, I dropped out of college, and the guitar player that I had started playing with in Direct Drive, Joe Scuderi, he and we moved to Chicago. And when we moved to Chicago, we kept the name Direct Drive, but we replaced the bass player and the drummer. So that's where we met Dave Shield, and that's where we met Virus X. And but we're still playing kind of the same style of music. We still hadn't developed our own thing, our own style. And so um, after we played out, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so as Direct Drive in Chicago, and we were evolving. So was the music scene, so was the styles of music that we were seeing in hardcore. And suddenly, I saw the Bad Brains in D.C. My parents lived in D.C. I was utterly floored by them. The first Bad Brains tape
Oh, I
made the
would have been
rounds.
too.
The first Bad Brains tape made the rounds, and everybody was very excited by it. And so we decided to change our style, accelerate. We took some of the same elements that we had been working with, like reggae and jazz and funk, and we incorporated it into the new hyperspeed version of ourselves. And that became, since we changed the style, we changed the name, and that became Articles of Faith.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say your band definitely does musically stand out from many of the hardcore bands around the time. And one thing I've always wondered is, so I am not religious and I've never really been, but what's the logo on your what album is it? You have a
Yeah, we were originally going to do, I think the original intention was we were going to do a gun sight, the crosshairs of a gun sight. And then somebody else had already done that. So we were too lazy to figure out a good logo, and we just kind of moved the gun sight to the side there. And, that became the upside down off center circle one. There wasn't a whole lot of profound thinking behind that. It was mostly that the original idea behind a logo had already been done by somebody else, so we were too lazy to figure out a good one, and we just came up with that.
yeah, it's the little thing on the album Core.
Yeah.
I thought that was maybe some sort of religious icon or something like that.
Nope.
Oh,
Nope.
interesting.
It was just us being lazy.
Man, that works. That works too. I read that you did a project called The Weatherman with Tom Morello of RATM.
Yep. Yeah. So Tom, when I moved to Seattle in 1995, right before I moved, I had met Tom when I was in Alloy, on one of the Alloy tours in Los Angeles. This was when I think the first RATM record had come out, but they weren't the humongous world-shattering band that they became. They were still a new band, and Tom came down to a show and that Alloy played in Los Angeles, and I met him, and he told me he was a big AOF fan, and
That's awesome.
we hit it off. And Tom is from Libertyville, Illinois, and that's part of the reason that he was very hip to AOF. So Libertyville is a suburb just north of Chicago, and northeast of Chicago, northwest of Chicago, excuse me. And so he was familiar with my stuff, and he liked Alloy a lot. He was very complimentary. And then when I got back to Boston in '95, Tom was calling me or sending me. He was calling me, and he was like, "I've got a bunch of songs. RATM's not going to do them. Do you want to put some lyrics on them and do something?" I'm like, "Sure." So he did, and so in the summer of '95, he sent me a bunch of tapes, and I wrote, I don't know, 12 or 15 lyrics for the stuff that he had. And then he called me back. He's like, and I tracked them. I did like some rough tapes over the top of it and sent it back to him in LA. And then I moved out to Seattle. And then once I moved here, he's like, "Well, listen, since you're out on the West Coast, why don't you come down to LA? We'll do some rehearsals. We'll try and play this stuff together." So I did. He put together a band. We practiced a few times. And the original set of songs, and then Tom had this old notebook filled with stuff, and he's like, "Well, I got some other songs here. Let me play this for you." So then he would play a new song. We'd jam on it. I'd lay down on the floor of the practice space and write out a whole new set of lyrics for that song, and then we'd get up and we'd play it. And he had never worked like that because Zach would take 6 months to write a single song, the lyrics for a single song.
Or 20 years in this case.
Yeah, or much longer, right? And so for somebody to do it in 20 minutes was unthinkable to him, but that's the way I've always operated. And it always works best for me if I work off of whatever's my first inspiration. I don't think I've ever held on to a song or rewritten a song or worked on a song for anything longer than a couple of days at most. And so we hit it off really well, and it was fun. And so then the first time we went in the studio was with Ted Nicely, and we did this record up in North Hollywood, or not North Hollywood, it's out in the Valley. And I think that was 12 songs, 14 songs. And then we did another record at Dr. Dre's house.
Dr. Dre?
In Silver Lake, yeah. Dre had a studio in the back of his house, so we did the studio at his house.
Damn.
And we did that one with Brett Eliason, and was it Brett or who else was it? Who engineered that one? I forget. But anyway, we did that one, and so we had altogether, I think, at the end of the day, maybe 25 tracks. And Tom gave them to Sony, and then nothing happened with it. And I think the reason nothing happened with it was that, in a lot of ways, it was really Tom's effort to push Zach into being more responsive. I mean, Tom and Zach did not get along.
Oh, they didn't?
And Tom wanted to work a lot faster and a lot harder, and Zach did not. And so I think the idea of creating a side project was really designed to light a fire under Zach, because what happened is Sony didn't do anything with the record, and then RATM went back in the studio and did Evil Empire. So it worked from the standpoint of kind of like getting Zach off the dime. But it was also one of these things where the songs that we wrote together ended up being re-recorded by Audioslave. So Cochise, that song off the first Audioslave record, Cochise was originally a song that Tom and I had written together called Enola Gay. And
Damn.
So he ended up using the music uh, for a bunch of Audio Slaves for the first Audio Slave record, and Chris rewrote all the lyrics his own way, naturally. Um, so those songs never came out. There's a couple of them are on the internet, but the whole album, which was I don't even have a copy of the whole album, which is a shame. I don't even know where it is. I don't know if it exists anymore. But there's a few songs on the internet anyway.
That's why I was bringing it up because as I've been doing research into your musical career, that came up a couple times. Like I've read it, but I haven't been able to find anything by it. And I was like, "Is this even real?" So I figured I'd ask you about that.
No, it's real. It's real. And I mean, Tom's been a friend for a long time. I mean, the fact that we didn't put out the record, I'm still kind of waiting for him to do it. I think at some point he might.
Yeah,
You
I
never
feel like he
know.
probably would.
You,
Maybe
you
he'll see
never know.
this
He
somehow
probably he
and he'll
probably
put it
will.
out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I just saw Tom last year. He played here in town, and the bass player in my current band, Redshift, is a huge RATM fan. So I took Mike down to see Tom, and we hung out. And Tom's his usual loquacious self, and always great to be around. And actually, we saw him before that. Um, we went to this other show with Tom. My sister went. My wife went. We had dinner with Tom. So I mean, he's actually. I mean, I ping him probably 2 or 3 times a year, and we chat. I don't know. I mean, we've stayed in touch for 20 years. That's a good thing.
Yeah, Tom Morello, I kind of put him on the same shelf as Dave Grohl and a few others because although they've transcended the underground by a huge margin, they still stay in contact with, bands like yours. Dave Grohl, he still stays in contact with the Germs. They did a reunion. A lot of them, Tom's one of those who knows the underground and hasn't left it to a degree, and I respect
Yeah,
that about him.
yeah, that's right. And Dave actually did the Teenage Time Killers thing, which I also did. So Dave and I, so Teenage Time Killers was a project that Reed Mullen from Corrosion of Conformity started.
Good band.
Yeah, well, I mean, Reed was a great guy. And the project was Teenage Time Killers. I don't know if you know that record.
No,
We,
I haven't. I'm glad
it's
I
like,
mentioned Dave Grohl, so now I get to learn about it.
yeah, so it was 5 years ago. And what happened was Reed had a bunch of songs that he wanted to record, and he decided that he would do it with all of his favorite singers. So he called up about 2 dozen guys,
Holy shit.
and he's like, "I've got some songs. Dave Grohl's going to play bass, and
Bass?
yeah, bass. And so, do you want to be on this record?" And I'm like, "Sure." So Dave and Reed wrote this song, and then they sent it to me, and then I wrote the lyrics and put the vocals on it and sent it back to them, and that became the song Bleeding to Death, which was their title, and I just put the lyrics around it. And then we did a big show at the Fonda Theater 5 years ago in LA. It was kind of a great experience. They had a house band. Mick Murphy was playing guitar, and Reed played drums, and Derek Envy played bass, and so on shuffled like 20 singers, and each of us would do 3 or 4 songs, and then the next guy would come on. So I did the Teenage Time Killer song. I did What We Want Is Free. I did a cover of TVI by Iggy and the Stooges. And it was a great night.
It sounds like a great night.
There were so many great guys there. Mick and Terry, and Lee Ving was there, and I hadn't seen him in like 20 years, 30 years. So
Damn.
that was kind of fun to talk to him, and so we really had a great time that night. It was a marvelous evening, and it was all courtesy of Reed Mullen. Bless that man. It was great.
Damn, I wish I could have saw that.
There's lots of video of it on the internet. You can. It was filmed, and there's more than a few videos. I unfortunately I don't think they ever posted the TVI cover because they don't have the rights to the song. But
Understandable.
yeah,
So can
yeah.
you tell me about ghost dances?
Yeah, that was the first record I did after Articles of Faith. I had, I don't know, I had 10 or 11 songs that I had written on acoustic guitar. And I had quit AOF and I was going to go to graduate school. So between the time that I started graduate school and I left AOF, what I did was I went to Inner Ear Studios in DC. I knew Don from the DC scene. And so me and Don recorded that whole record in his basement, basically, because in those days, Inner Ear was in the basement of his house. And we just did all of those tracks. And Ian was coming in afterwards, and so he was hanging out. But it was a great record. It was a great experience. And it was probably the first acoustic record for anybody coming out of the hardcore scene.
Yeah, I was gonna say when I listened to that because I discovered it a bit after. I've known that for a while, but I knew about AOF first, and then I discovered that, and I was like, oh wow, that's actually pretty good. Because a lot of times when I tend to, I'm not really an acoustic fan. I'll just get that out there, but yours is very genuine and it's played well. I know those are kind
I've
of
played
great
it a few
words, but
times live. Played it a few times live. Right after that record came out, Bob Mould had me open up for him on a bunch of shows. So I played I played a lot of songs from that record with Bob, and I don't think I've ever played the full record live though. That would be interesting to do.
you should do it sometime.
Yeah.
So you're currently playing with Dead Ending.
No, yeah, I am. I mean, actually, there's 3 bands that I'm in right now. So Dead Ending is one. That's myself, Jeff Dean, who's been in 100 bands from Chicago, Derek Grant from Alkaline Trio is a drummer, and then we've had a kind of a rotating list of bass players, but originally the bass player was Joe Principi from Rise Against, and then Dave Shield from AOF played on one of the singles, and then Nate Voorhees from Ensign played on the album Shoot the Messenger. So we've had a kind of revolving cast of bass players. Joe and Nate both have played live shows with us, so I would really like to play some more live shows with Dead Ending, but who knows when we're going to do that. Then I'm in Report Suspicious Activity with
Yeah,
Jay Robbins and Eric Deno and Darren Zentek, and then the band that I'm in here in Seattle is Redshift, and that's Mike Katz and Adam Gross. Mike's a bass player and Adam's a drummer. It's a 3-piece. So
I truly admire you for continuing music after AOF, because I've interviewed a lot of musicians, a lot of punks, which, by the way, I'm 26, just to get that out of there. I've interviewed a lot of punks from the 80s early scene, and only a small handful have material since the 80s up till now, and which I haven't heard everything you've put out, but from what I have heard, you're keeping it alive, man, and I really love that.
yeah, I mean, I don't think the only time that I've actually stopped playing in my life when I first moved out to Seattle, I did that Weatherman project, and after that fell apart, I really stopped for probably 5 years or 6 years. I just worked. I got married. I had a kid.
Oh, congratulations.
And I didn't, I didn't feel a compelling need to write music. My muse tends to be kind of political, so when George Bush managed to finagle his way into the presidency, it sort of reactivated stuff, and that's when I did the first RSA record with Jay, and that sort of rekindled stuff. And since then, I haven't actually stopped playing at all. I've been playing continuously since then.
I was gonna bring up Ivanka wants her orange back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But we did that for the election in 2016.
Oh,
So,
for the election?
yeah, we
Oh,
did it. That record came out probably 2 weeks before the election in 2016. So,
what's your I don't normally get too political on this channel, but what is your opinion of what's happening like right now?
well, I mean, I feel like we've somewhat there's 250,000 people dead, man. I mean,
Yeah.
they're dead. They're dead because there's an incredibly incompetent administration in office right now. We're actually under quarantine here in my house right now because my wife was diagnosed with COVID.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, man. Hope she
Uh,
gets better.
she's fine. She's fine. She's fine. But I don't know what these bozos who support Trump, and there's 70 fucking million of them. I don't know what they need to bring them into reality. Does somebody in their family have to die because of the incompetence of these people? I don't know. So if Biden's able to put a competent government in place, that would be great. But I don't think much is going to change in the next 4 years because the Republicans they've given up on government and they've given up on the United States as an idea, and they're just out to win office and hold power for themselves and make their friends rich. And that level of corruption isn't necessarily unprecedented in American history. There's been corruption the length of the republic, the baldness of it, the resolute unwillingness to govern even in the slightest and just use the instruments of government for your cronies. That's pretty unprecedented. It's like the Harding administration on steroids. It's really, really a bad thing. And it's not going to change just because Biden's president.
Yeah, I even voted in a certain direction, and I'm willing to admit that he might just be a couple notches below Trump. I mean, in all reality, they're both wings of the same bird. But you know what I found kind of funny, which I say funny in kind of a negative sense, the Million MAGA March. You hear about that happening like right
And
now, actually?
what do they got, like 3,000 people there, 2,000 people doing it? I saw the pictures online this morning. It's pretty pathetic. And the guys who are marching are all these right-wing cosplayers. These guys are not even they're not even as tough as the skinheads that we had in the 80s. They're just dumbasses. They're on social media jerking off every day, and then they put on a fucking skate helmet and go march around like they're goddamn Nazis. They're idiots.
Yeah, I cry at the fact that within the next couple of weeks, the Million MAGA March is going to turn into the Million COVID case. You know,
Yeah, well, it already is. I mean,
that's exactly what's going to happen.
this whole Trump goes through the Midwest on his goddamn super spreader rally events. I mean, what did they think was going to fucking happen? Again, it's like these people have taken leave of their senses. They're absolutely insane. The pandemic is real. My wife has the bug. It's not a fake.
Oh, I
250,000 people are dead, man.
I had it back in
This is
March.
not. Yeah, my friend Pat had it. How did you do with it? My friend Pat was down for 6 weeks.
I was in and out of the hospital for about 2 weeks back in March. And what made it shitty for me is the fact that I've already got asthma, and without COVID even existing, I already have bad shortness of breath because of my anxiety, and it just kind of was like, there's a fire on the ground, well, pour more fuel on it, pretty much. That was what it did for me.
I mean, you're a young man in your 20s and you're hospitalized with this thing. What the fuck? I mean, people. What is it? I really, it's incomprehensible to me that anyone can support this president and his stupidity. It really is. It's non-ideological, right? Like, it really doesn't matter whether you're far left or far right, for that matter. You have like some basic level of competence and reasonable capacity to do work and govern is what's required here. And this is insane, man. It's
For
insane.
Since I've got a handful of Trump supporting friends who tell me the reason they love him is because he is unfiltered. He doesn't have the politician talk. That's why most people like him, but that's not a good reason to keep him in office.
I mean, so yeah, your aquarium when it's unfiltered is filled with dead fish.
That's a good way to put it. Oh god, I'm a little worried about what's actually going on at this very moment with the transition and all that. I just,
Yeah, I don't think this is where Trump's resolute incompetence probably works well for us. Frankly, I don't think the guy can't stop a pandemic, and I don't think he can affect a military coup or any kind of coup. Frankly, he's on his way out, and he's going to go lick his wounds in Mar-a-Lago till the creditors come calling and take it away from him. The guy's a pathetic loser,
as someone
and he
who,
and he
oh sorry,
always has been a pathetic loser.
I was gonna ask, as someone who was politically charged against the Reagan administration back in the 80s, how would you compare Donald Trump to Ronald Reagan and the society back then to now?
So I mean, Donald Trump's the worst president in American history. It's pretty easy. There's no other president in American history whose incompetence and singular inability to govern and lead has led to the deaths of 250,000 Americans. By the time this pandemic is over, there's going to be over 500,000 people dead. So he's probably there's a good chance that more Americans will die in this pandemic than died in the Civil War, right? Which is the most catastrophic war in American history. So, you know, that's probably next. And the Civil War wasn't the responsibility of any single president, right? It was the
Yeah.
confluence of a bunch of stuff that had happened over 20 years, really 20, 30 years. So in history.
Yeah, I'm kind of speechless on the whole thing. That's why I'm not really saying much, because I like to get the opinions of those who have lived much longer than me that can compare it to the past. But I guess, yeah, considering what he's done, it's not really much to compare it to, because I've been looking up Reagan a lot because Trump likes to quote Reagan all the time. I mean, he's told his motto, "Make America Great Again." That was Reagan's, wasn't it? And
No, Reagan's was "It's Morning in America Again,"
oh, I thought
which
he.
is which was just as bullshit and crap as "Make America Great Again."
So
So,
so what was it like living under the Reagan administration?
well, he was a big phone with Trump, right? He was a actor who was hired by men to run the country for him. So, everybody in the '80s knew that. There was a reason that hardcore in the '80s had such an anti-Reagan political tinge. It was he was a big phony, and he was running the country for rich men, for the guys who paid him. And what we got out of it was government cheese. There was this thing in '84 or '85, I forget. No, it had to be '83 or '84, where the government decided that the best thing they could do for poor people was to give you these blocks of cheese.
What?
They weighed about 4 pounds or 5 pounds. And so, you know, at the hardcore house that we had in Chicago, Big Blue, where all of Articles of Faith live, we got some government cheese because none of us had very much money.
Wait, this is a real thing?
Oh yeah, and so we got we put I don't think we put I don't think it could fit more than 2 bricks of government cheese in our freezer. But you could eat on that cheese for, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. It was a lot of cheese.
Holy
That's what
shit.
we got. We got government cheese.
That was your stimulus check, wasn't it?
That was our stimulus check. That's right. Same bullshit. Same government by stunt. When these guys don't have abilities, they don't have capacities, so they create stunts that are designed to gum up the news cycle for 24 to 48 hours, and then they move on to the next goddamn stunt. They're completely ineffectual people, completely ineffectual human beings. They have absolutely no soul. They're abominations.
Your song, I wanted to bring it up, American Dream from Core. Wait, yeah.
Yeah, that was on the first. It was actually the last track on "Give Thanks." Yeah.
You have things, yeah, my bad. Um, what is your idea of the American Dream, or does it even exist in your eyes?
Well, the thing about dreams is you wake up from them, right? The the American dream. What is the American dream? It had some reality for many, 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 many decades. My grandfather stowed away on a freighter from Sicily to the United States because he was chasing it. Um, and for a lot of immigrants, it was a real thing. It was the dream of a better life than they had in the countries that they were in because they were super poor. They had no opportunities. They couldn't see their way out. They were living in class-bound societies, or they were living in societies with oppressive social systems that didn't have a lot of mobility in it. And so the American dream for my grandfather was this idea that they could come to the United States and they could work hard and they could get something for themselves that would give them a reasonable life with a reasonable decency. And so it was a real thing for my grandfather, who was from Terre Haute, Indiana. He was originally from Termini Imerese, Sicily, but who lived in Terre Haute, Indiana. And when I was growing up, we would go visit them, and we'd go to the Elks Club, and the Elks Club was filled with Sicilian and Romanian and Polish immigrants, and they were all part of that same movement and that same dream. A lot of them worked in the coal mines in Terre Haute, or like they were like my grandfather. They were truck driver. So, but in my grandfather's day, that dream had some resonance, and you could be an illiterate truck driver and make a reasonable living with it. And so that's what that American dream was for them. I don't know what it is anymore. I don't know what it is for people your age, or you're about 8 years older than my daughter. I don't know what it'll be for Sophia. It's never been real in a lot of ways in America. My grandfather was lucky enough that he was in the United States after World War II, and there was this great economic boom because all the rest of the economies in the world were trashed. But so it's pretty unique. If you go back further in American history, if you go back 150 years or 200 years, you're going to see a lot of fucking misery in this country for poor people. And if you were black, that American dream, even in the post-war period, wasn't all great. So, the American dream means different things for different people.
Yeah.
If it exists at all, and it exists in a very finite period of time. But it was real for my grandfather, and it's still real for immigrants, coming up from Mexico or Guatemala. So it's not completely bullshit, but it's always been super limited. It's always been race-based.
And highly exaggerated.
And it's used by rich men to keep people dumb and stupid, because their whole thing would be, these immigrants, these guys in Florida who voted against Biden because they think Trump's good for Latinos. It's bullshit, right? It's bullshit. Trump's a racist, man.
What blew my fucking mind is when I read that all the Cubans then of Florida voted for Trump because they were afraid of Biden and socialism. I'm like, Biden's not a fucking socialist.
Exactly.
He's nothing near a socialist.
In that case, the American dream is nothing but a delusion. If it's that easily used by rich men for their advantages. So.
I wanted to bring up the photo on What We Want Is Free. The little kids sitting on the brick wall.
Yeah, that was Virus X. So he was the one that found that photo. Virus was a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party.
Oh my goodness.
I think that was in the RCP newsletter or whatever propaganda Bill used to read. But it was a nice. It was from England, and it was from the Brighton riots. In the early '80s, late '70s, early '80s. There was a series of riots in Brighton neighborhood of London, and that was one of those takeaways. And Virus liked it because, even in the middle of conflict, you saw a lot of friendship between people of different races. And I could get behind that. I didn't care that it came from the RCP newsletter.
Yeah, I like the cover on it. And it goes well with the title, What We Want Is Free. I like that cover. What's the picture on the inside though? Everybody standing inside of a tunnel.
I think that I don't really rightly remember exactly what that is, but that might be the original practice space of Articles of Faith. So AOF used to practice at a place in Chicago called Space Place, and Space Place was a converted slaughterhouse.
Eh,
So
good.
the practice spaces were all meat lockers,
I could see
and
that from this picture.
it yeah, and it was kind of a good thing because those meat lockers, those walls are super super thick, so it keeps this got this built-in soundproofing. The bad thing about it was they were also airtight, so
Oh God.
after one song, you were absolutely fucking burning up, and you could put a bunch of fans in there, but they're just going to circulate hot air, hot stinky ass air. But Ministry used to practice right next door to us, and at the time, I think Ministry heard us playing through the wall enough times that they abandoned the new romantic bullshit that Al was pursuing back then, and got a little bit more guitar centric. At least I like to flatter myself that was the process.
Yeah, I don't own that specific. The only actual album from AOF that I owned because I haven't been able to find them in record sources. Core, the greatest. Fuck, I lost it. It's on
Yeah,
my
so
shelf. The greatest
that
hits
was
album.
actually that's a German release. You can buy from Alternative Tentacles the two CDs, the complete set,
Yeah, the
and they have
complete
a lot of
volume 81 to 83. That's the one that I have.
yeah.
Damn, I'm blown away by that. So I already asked you about. Did I ask you about Jones Very?
You didn't? Nope.
Okay,
That was the band I did after AOF. Yeah.
AOF is. So
So that was a three-piece. It was me and James Van Bramer and Jeff Goddard. Jeff was an amazing player, and we did that when I lived in Boston. I was in graduate school, and I think we started that band in late '88, early '89. Sometimes live we would be a four-piece. So Steve Ristine from Slapshot would occasionally play guitar live for us. Kenny Chambers from Moving Targets played live for us, and Pat Mahoney, who would eventually become the guitarist in Alloy, also would do some gigs. So sometimes it was a three-piece, sometimes it was a four-piece live. But we played a lot of shows in Boston. We never did a national tour. We played a quick tour through Canada once, but we never played in Europe. We never played out very much. We did the 3 records with Lou Giordano at Fort Apache South, and Fort Apache North. We played a lot in Boston. We ended up opening up a lot for Slapshot, which was always be an unusual bill because Slapshot was probably the most hardcore of hardcore Boston bands back then, and Jones Very was super experimental.
yeah, I've listened to quite a bit of Jones Very.
I mean, our Jeff was a Berkeley student, and I was actually listening to a lot of jazz back then. So what we did was we tried to take noise and kind of a jazz perspective on the work that we were doing, and we never played with a set list, so every set was improvised.
Nice.
A lot of the songs would be they had improvised parts in them, so we would just have a lot of long. Whatever noisy shit that I wanted to do on my guitar, we would do, and then Jamie would do a double shot on the drums when he was bored with me, and then we would go back into the chorus or something. We did things like that, and there's one record, Radio Wave, that we put out on Bitscore. It's a really good representation of the band because it is really live. It's 2 live sides, and live we could be either the best band you'd ever see in your life or the worst, depending upon the night, because we never really knew what we were going to do when we got up there on stage, and we just kind of tried to follow it. I
I
was
love
really,
that.
I was very anti-college rock back then because it was becoming such a big deal. And every college rock band would have a set list, and they would play the same thing night after night, exactly what they played on the record. And I just thought that was so wrong and against the spirit of music. And my attitude was kind of like, well, if we suck tonight, we suck, and if we're great, we're great.
Hell yeah.
But it just depends upon, if we're great, you get to go say a story about you saw the best band in the world last night, and it becomes an unforgettable thing. So that was kind of what we were aiming for, and I don't know that we always got it. In retrospect, actually, I think those records are pretty good, and there's an avid fan base for Jones Very that doesn't know Articles of Faith or doesn't care about Articles of Faith, and they like Jones Very. So it's kind of interesting. That band ended up getting its own fan base that wasn't really related to anything else that I've done. So it's good.
I gotta say, coming from the perspective of myself, I've always known AOF, but I just learned about Jones Very just a bit ago, and I gotta say, I enjoy both bands. I'm not as familiar with Jones as I am with Articles of Faith, obviously, because I don't know all the records, but I listened to enough that I would have loved to see you guys live.
Yeah, it was a really good live band, and I've actually thought about I've thought about reactivating Jones Very because
Do it.
there are songs that I've written in the last 5 years that are really Jones Very songs. So Jones Very, the musical sensibility is a little more pop, and it's a little more it's more like open chorded.
Yeah.
It's more jangly guitar, and I've written songs like that in the last 5 years, and I've thought, this is really a Jones Very song, and I should get Jeff back together and record this. But Jeff lives in Belgium, and there's no way that's not going to
Oh.
happen.
You know
And
something?
I don't think I would do Jones Very without Jeff, to be honest, because his bass playing was such a tremendous part of that band, and what he brought to those compositions was incredible. In a lot of ways, the bass was the lead instrument in that band, and on a lot of songs, he's really taking the lead, and the guitars are really in the pocket with the drums. So I don't know. I wouldn't do a Jones Very record without Jeff.
I was gonna mention this. I really appreciate the fact that you've done noise rock because just coming from my own opinion, I grew up in hardcore. I think I found Bad Religion, Dead Kennedys, No Effects in the early 2000s, but in 2011, my roommate back then, his name is Chad, he introduced me to Sonic Youth and noise rock, and it was like completely rewriting how I see music. Like when I first heard noise rock, I was like, oh my god, this is rock music, but there's no limits. Like there's no rules. Like you said, it's improvisation. There's no rules to it, and that's why noise has kind of became my favorite genre of music up to this day.
Well, I mean, there were two aesthetic principles behind hardcore. One was noise, and the other was speed. And those were the two aesthetic principles that hardcore explored. There's a lot of reason that people will say that hardcore is dead by '85. I don't. There's been lots of good hardcore bands
Oh,
since then.
absolutely.
But one of the reasons that people say that is by 1985, everything innovative that you could do with noise or speed would have been done. So there wasn't a lot. Everything after that is going to be a variant of that.
Yeah,
It's
I get
not
what you
going to
mean.
be. It's not really going to break open space. Now that's when computers come in the 90s and the aughts. That's not true of noise at all, because you can do a lot of things that you couldn't do back in the 80s. But in terms of a four-piece rock band, by 1985, pretty much all the aesthetic principles related to speed or noise have been explored by one band or another. And there's not a lot of new stuff that you're going to be able to find out there.
What's your Have you ever played with Sonic Youth or Thurston Moore?
No, I don't think AOF ever played with Sonic Youth, and actually it's very strange. um, Articles of Faith was disliked by a group of hipsters in the '80s
Oh
uh, be,
goodness.
because we were too political for their taste, and they didn't like that, and they didn't like the interviews that I gave, slamming the country, and so one of the hipster bands that didn't like Articles of Faith back in the day was Sonic Youth, and
Oh my
actually,
god.
Thurston would badmouth me
Oh my god.
in the press, and then I don't know, about 10 years ago, um, it turned around and just was different. So I don't know. I don't know. I mean, he and I are friends on Facebook. I don't.
I got
I
now
you
that
tell me.
now that you brought that up, I just have to say this. In 2019, I interviewed John Percelli of Youth of Today, and he told me that back in the 80s, Thurston Moore ran a fanzine, and he was talking a bunch of shit on Ray Kappa, and John found Thurston at a record store up in New York, and it was like, hey, yo, you've been talking shit on Ray. I oughta beat your ass right here, and I was like, what the fuck? Maybe Thurston just I don't know, that is weird. If I ever get to interview him, I'll ask him about that. He's apparently talked some smack on a bunch of political bands back in the 80s.
Yeah, but I feel like it's interesting. You get older, you get better perspective, right? Maybe he had better perspective. The other thing is, like, I wasn't adverse to talking shit about people back in the day either. I think one of the things is when you're in your 20s and you got a head full of bullshit and you don't have enough experience to temper it.
Yep.
So you're gonna say stuff and you're gonna do stuff that in retrospect is embarrassing.
Yep. I can say that at 26. Hell
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Hell, I can say that within the last fucking 7 months.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I wanted to also ask you about Primary, your 2016 solo album.
oh, I'm glad you have that record, man. That
Oh,
record
I have it. I
was
have it digitally. I don't have it physically.
well, it wasn't done physically. It's only digital.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did that with Colin. And oh man, that was such a great experience. We, Colin Sears, who was the drummer in Alloy, he lives in Portland, which is it's like a 3-hour drive south of Seattle. And I don't know, about 5 years ago, I started going down there and playing with him and Gene Pandolfi, who was the bass player. And then I had written a bunch of songs, and so live we played, I don't know, 3 or 4 shows. It called ourselves Black Theory, and we had a couple other guitar players in the band because I wanted to go back to 3-piece, and so it was a 3-guitar band, just like AOF had been, and we played a few shows. It was really a lot of fun, but it was hard to make that trip down to Portland all the time, and I was giving up all my weekends for it, and because you couldn't really, you'd have to stay overnight because it's a long enough drive that you had to, and it just became too difficult to do. And when we did the record, I just wanted to do a guitar record. I really wanted to make a big goddamn guitar record, and I asked Jeff to come out and produce it, and so he came out and did it. We did it in Oregon City, which is just south of Portland, and Colin just played the shit out of the drums, and but it's a big guitar record, right? Like it's just I wanted to just make a big guitar record, and I don't know, that song Trance that we did, that's still one of my favorite songs, and Colin's got that absolutely astonishing break in the middle of it where he goes to side sticking his hi-hat stand. It's fucking great.
Will it?
So
Will the album ever be pressed to cassette or vinyl or something?
I suppose it would if somebody wanted to do it. I should ask Biafra if he would do it.
I was
I
gonna say
mean,
I own a small cassette tape label. I'll make tapes of it if you want me to. I mean, I
well,
make I make micro runs. I'm talking like 100 to 200 tapes because I'm a tiny
dude,
fucking label. But
I'm giving you permission right now to just go bootleg it and do it.
I
It's
love you.
fine. Yeah, go ahead and bootleg it and do it.
Fuck yeah.
I love the idea of cassette version of that. Make sure that you copy that art. So that art is that painting that I used for the art for that is by the Chicago artist Wes Kimler. And Wes did the cover of Articles of Faith's In This Life, and he did the cover of the Ghost Dances. And I mean, he's a phenomenal artist. And I asked him if I could use that painting for the cover, and he gave it to me. So go ahead, so you have my permission to bootleg it for cassette, but the cassette has to have that art.
Oh, it will.
cover.
It will. Absolutely.
Yeah,
You just literally made my entire day with that. Um.
yeah.
Oh fuck! What was the other question I was gonna ask you? Um. Damn it. Oh, your Articles of Faith reunion in 2010 in Riot Fest.
Yeah. So that was it's one of the 2 times that we've gotten Articles of Faith back together since we broke up, and that was at the request of Riot Fest.
Oh,
So I don't
really?
think it wasn't something that we had planned. They asked us to play, and so I felt like, well, if we're gonna play, let's write some new music and record it, and what we did was we worked out the bones of those songs at a distance, because Joe Scuderi, the guitar player in AOF, lives in San Francisco. I live in Seattle, and the other 3 guys, Dorian, Dave, and Bill, they live in Chicago. So what we did was we worked out the bones of that song at a distance, and then we rented a house in Chicago for about 2 weeks before Riot Fest, and we practiced every day. I mean, we practiced every night, and in the days we recorded the New Normal Catastrophe record at Million Yen, again with Jeff. And it was great. It was a great experience. And then we played 2 shows. We played at the Metro, and then we played in Wicker Park at some pickup invitation-only club that only held like 300 people. So it was one of those special side events that Riot Fest put together. So it was an invitation-only kind of after show. I think we started at midnight and ended at 2, something like that. And that second show was so transcendent, so mind-bending. It was just an amazing experience. It was easily one of the top 5 shows I've ever played in my life. It was easily the best Articles of Faith show that we ever played. And when we were done with it, I felt like everybody was really very high from that show, and we started talking about maybe we should get the band back together, and maybe we should play. But I mean, I was 50 years old then, and Bill was Virus X, our drummer, was I think 56, and we would play, and then he'd have ice packs on both arms,
Oh
and
shit.
he just like. Articles of Faith was a young man's band. It was a very physically demanding band. It's very intense music, very physically intense music. And after we were done with that show, yeah, we talked a lot about maybe going out on tour and doing some more with Articles of Faith. But I got back to Seattle, the more I thought about it, I'm like, are you going to be one of those aging dinosaur hardcore bands that goes out there, you play to a bunch of middle-aged men because the young guys don't know who you are anyway, and you're gonna make an embarrassment of yourself because you really can't do it anymore. It was one thing to play 2 nights like we did in Chicago. That was easy. But it would be another thing to play 6 weeks on the road every fucking night. If we did that at our age, we'd end up in this terrible space where many of the shows that we would play would be lousy. And I just didn't want to trash. Articles of Faith was a pretty astonishing band. And anybody who saw us back in the day will tell you that.
I wish I would have seen you back then.
Anybody that saw the band they'll tell you just how intense of a band it was. And I didn't want to trash that reputation. I wanted us still to be one of the greatest live bands that ever were out there.
And I respect you for that.
Yeah, so I think it was disappointing to the guys, but in retrospect, I think that was the right call. And
I
so
respect you on that.
we will never play again. We'll never play again. I don't think so.
That's what kind of sucks about me being 26, which I turned 27 in 5 days. But all the bands that I grew up listening to, like I think when I first messaged you on Facebook, I said I was a lifelong fan. Like I'm talking about my lifelong, my longevity on this earth, because sometimes, for instance, like when I interviewed Keith Morris, he's like, "Oh, you're 26. I thought you were a lifelong fan." I'm like, "Yeah, my longevity." Like,
Yeah.
I wish I was there for when you guys formed, because as of someone who is 26 now, yes, I know your records. I know what you sound like in the studio because of your recordings. But do you know a woman by the name of Lori Straight Edge from Seattle, by chance?
No, I don't know her.
She did well. She's my aunt, and she did a bunch she worked the shows in the Seattle '80s hardcore scene, and in her words to me every time is, they might sound good on record, but you truly haven't experienced them until you see them live. And that's the one thing that sucks is practically all the bands that I've grown up listening to, I don't know what they sound like live, and I really wish I did.
Well, I mean, I never saw Elvis. I never saw the Beatles, right? Like
Yeah.
I never saw Django Reinhardt or Charlie Parker. So I never saw Louis Armstrong. There's a lot of I would have, what it would have been like to see Louis Armstrong in the Hot Five in 1925 or 1926. It would have been fucking amazing.
Hell yeah.
So there's. But look, the other thing is there's going to be bands in your lifetime that are going to be astonishing, and when I'm dead, I'll never get to see them. So
That's kind of sad.
right?
But so I've pretty much think I've asked. Is there any other side projects that I haven't mentioned of yours that you'd like to get out there?
No, I mean, like I said, Redshift, we're doing Redshift now, and Redshift's got a Bandcamp site that's got a bunch of stuff up. We have been recording through the pandemic, so even though we haven't been able to play live, we had started playing live last year. We were doing pretty well here in Seattle. And then, of course, no one's playing anymore. So, but Redshift will come back, and you can get a feel for Redshift by checking out the tracks on Bandcamp. And yeah, the Redshift stuff it's different. It's a lot different than the AOF and all the other bands that I've been in. It's more like again, I was very keen on playing guitar in this band and focusing on guitar. And Adam and Mike aren't from the hardcore background, so it's a little bit different. We bonded on the shared ground of surf music, so a lot of the songs have kind of surf vibe to them.
Yeah.
And we have done some punky stuff. The most recent song we did, Mussolini Necktie, is pretty much on par with all the other hardcore stuff I've done, and it's a nice anti-Trump hymn, so you might enjoy
Yeah, I'll
that.
give that a listen. I was going
Yeah.
to bring this up real quickly. So, there's probably a very small chance that you know who this band is, but have you heard of Philippine hardcore band Dead Ends?
No, I don't know them.
I bring them up because Al DeMolanta, he's the guitarist and vocalist. They formed in the early '80s in the Philippines and disbanded in 1996 when Jay DeMolanta, the bassist, passed away. But I bring them up because they're kind of the most I'm working on releasing all 4/5 of their albums on my label, reissuing them, and since you have a band called Dead Endings, and also because you're a very politically charged person, I think that you would enjoy listening to Dead Ends because they're Pinoy hardcore from the '80s and also the '90s, which Al has gone on to play in a band called Throw, which I think you would get a kick out of them, which once we're done with this, I'll send you links to their albums.
Okay, well, here's what I'm doing now. I'm sending you my mailing address, my home address. I just sent it to you in Messenger. So if you're gonna do those cassettes,
Yes,
you gotta send me one.
absolutely. I'll send you more than one.
Okay.
I'll send you a good. Like, how many do you want?
Oh no, I mean one or two is fine. I don't need many.
Alrighty.
So, not that many people my age have cassette decks anymore. So I've got one, but it doesn't work unless I connect it to my computer. So there you go.
I do cassettes and sometimes I do CDs. I don't really prefer CDs because CDs don't sell worth a shit. But
Yeah.
in the Southeast Asia and especially throughout Europe, cassettes are fucking huge.
Well,
and
go for it.
underground.
Go for it, dude. Just send me a couple. I'll give one to my daughter. She might dig it.
Alrighty, well, is there anything else you want to add to this, brother?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
You do, man. I love a day.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
That was awesome.